Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you isn't something you've ever heard in a relationship talk, a late night confession video, or a polished love advice podcast. This is the raw, uncomfortable, beautiful truth about what men with avoidant tendencies secretly do during lovemaking when their love is real, not performative, not transactional, not manipulative, but genuine, soul-rattling, heart-aching, undeniable love. And you won't find this in a textbook or a dating coach script because no one wants to talk about it. No one dares to expose the tenderness of the avoidant heart when it's stripped of its armor in the most vulnerable act a human being can experience. When an avoidant man's love is real, you have to understand that his entire nervous system is wired against it, trained by years of emotional self-preservation to avoid attack and escape the very thing he secretly craves most. And it's in those moments of physical and emotional intimacy where this war inside him becomes undeniable, where his deepest instincts scream at him to pull away, to roll over, to find a distraction, to kill the moment before it exposes him. But when his love is genuine, something almost unnatural happens. He stays not because it's easy, but because you mean more than his fear. And that right there's a moment most people miss, most partners overlook, most relationship gurus never teach you to notice because they're too busy chasing words, promises, grand gestures, when the real proof of a man's love, especially an avoidance, is in those split seconds where he chooses discomfort, vulnerability, and raw presence over the well-rehearsed safety of distance. It isn't the staying itself that's remarkable. It's the inner battle you'll never fully see, the suffocating panic under the surface, the voice in his head telling him this is dangerous, that closeness equals risk, that attachment equals inevitable pain, and despite all that, something in him grips tighter, lingers longer, lets his guard down just enough for you to feel the weight of what he's never been able to verbalize. Because for avoidant men, words are currency they don't trust, but their actions in unguarded moments speak volumes if you know what to look for. And the act of not pulling away after lovemaking, of staying, of choosing proximity over escape, is a rebellion against a lifetime of emotional isolation. Every second he remains in that space with you is a war won against his survival instinct, a crack in the armor he spent years building. And the reason it matters so much isn't because it's romantic in the traditional sense, but because it's a sign that you have become more important to him than the stories he's told himself about love and safety. You have become a person whose presence feels worth the terror of vulnerability. And that's no small thing for someone whose attachment system has been wired to expect abandonment, betrayal, or suffocation the moment they let someone close enough to matter. So when he stays, when he doesn't roll over, when he doesn't retreat into silence or distraction or coldness, he is making a choice not to be a prisoner of his past for that one moment. And it is the loudest unspoken confession of love you ever receive. This isn't the kind of thing he'll ever announce. He won't say, "I'm choosing to stay because you matter to me," because that would require a level of emotional literacy and self-awareness he may not even consciously possess. But his body, his energy, his presence will betray him. And if you're tuned in, you'll feel it like a gravitational pull, a subtle shift in the air, where intimacy deepens into something sacred, something most people will never get to experience, and it won't last forever. Because for someone with avoidant tendencies, the impulse to withdraw will always resurface, but it's those moments of resistance, those battles won in the quiet aftermath of physical connection that reveal the depth of his love far more than any perfectly worded profession ever could understand. Too, that for an avoidant man, lovemaking is often safer than emotional closeness because it allows for physical intimacy without necessarily requiring vulnerability. But what makes this lingering after so profound is that it crosses the boundary between the physical and the emotional. It exposes him in a way he usually avoids at all costs, because staying means feeling. It's risking being seen. It means letting you touch not just his body, but the parts of him he hides from the world. And that is both exhilarating and terrifying for him. So when he chooses to remain there, wrapped around you, fingers tracing absent-minded patterns on your skin, cheek pressed to your shoulder, or hand resting protectively on your stomach, he is screaming his love in a language you were never taught to translate. And once you learn to listen for it, you'll realize how rare, how precious, how violently honest those moments are. The average person won't notice this because they're conditioned to measure love by declarations, by date nights, by flowers and public displays. But for someone whose avoidance has shaped their entire relational existence, staying present in those intimate, emotionally charged moments is like walking across a minefield barefoot. It's an act of courage disguised as silence, an act of love cloaked in stillness, and you won't fully understand what it cost him unless you've lived in the mind of someone who's been punished by closeness. But you don't have to understand it to feel it, because his energy will shift, his breathing will betray him, his grip will soften but never leave, and his body will remain pressed to yours as if trying to imprint your presence into his memory before his old instincts drag him back into detachment. This moment matters because it's unplanned. It's not a performance. It's not a manipulation or a tactic to keep you hooked. It's raw, it's real, and it's driven by a desperate, wordless need to stay connected to the only thing in his life that feels safe enough to dismantle the walls he spent years reinforcing. It is him choosing you, not in the easy, convenient way people talk about, but in the painful, terrifying, blood and bone deep way that forces him to confront every lie he's believed about himself and about love. And if you recognize this moment for what it is, it will change the way you see love. It will shatter every shallow metric you've ever been taught to measure affection by, because you'll realize that sometimes the greatest act of love isn't spoken, isn't flashy, isn't dramatic, it's quiet. It's subtle. It's in the refusal to flee when every fiber of his being is telling him to run the next time it happens. Pay attention, not to the words, not to the gestures, but to the absence of distance, to the heaviness of the air, to the way he holds you like he's trying to remember you at a cellular level, to the way his body hesitates before pulling away. And understand that in that hesitation lies the loudest truth he'll ever give you, a truth so powerful it bypasses language entirely, a truth that says you matter more than his fear, you matter more than his instinct to self-protect, you matter enough for him to stay in the most dangerous emotional territory he's ever dared to enter. And that isn't just love, it's war, and he's fighting it for you. His body language becomes the most honest traitor to his avoidant wiring when his real, because it's the one thing he can't fully control, no matter how conditioned he's become at hiding his heart behind deflections, distance, and disinterest. During lovemaking, an avoidant man may move with practiced skill, with careful control, with detachment that allows him to engage without ever surrendering emotionally. But when love crashes through the walls he spent years building, his touch changes. It stops being about control, about performance, about hitting the right moves or ticking the right boxes, and it becomes something raw, unplanned, almost clumsy in its sincerity. His hands don't just touch your skin. They start to memorize you, tracing the lines of your body, not as a possession, not as a conquest, but as a desperate attempt to anchor himself to the one person capable of making him feel safe in a world he has never trusted. Every graze of his fingertips over your shoulder, every absent-minded brush of his palm down your back, every lingering press of his lips to your neck is a wordless confession that terrifies him more than anything he could ever say out loud, because this kind of tenderness isn't a move. It's an exposure. Most avoidant men are masters at using touch without connection, using sex as a shield, as a distraction, as a controlled environment where vulnerability can be simulated without truly being felt. But genuine love rewires that transaction in real time. Suddenly, every point of contact matters. His touch slows down, as though if he moves too fast, he'll miss something sacred. It stops being about getting through it and starts being about being in it, holding it, drowning in it. You'll feel it when his hands brush over your face for no reason other than to remind himself you're real. You'll sense it in the way his fingertips map your ribs, your stomach, your spine, not with lust, but with reverence, as if he's trying to memorize the landscape of the only place he's ever felt safe. Avoidants don't know how to ask for reassurance, but in these moments their hands do it for them, asking you silently to stay, to not abandon them to hold space for them in a way they don't have the language to request. Then comes the most violent betrayal of his avoidance, his eye contact. Avoidants usually avoid it, especially in intimate moments, because locking eyes, being seen, and being seen means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means risking annihilation by the very closeness they crave. But when love is genuine, something else takes over. There will be a moment, a split second, where his gaze meets yours and holds. And in that single second, you'll see an entire lifetime of defense mechanisms shatter and a terrified, grateful, bleeding soul looking back at you. You'll see his fear of you leaving. You'll see his why that you're still there. You'll see his unspoken apology for every time he pushed you away. You'll see his desperate need for you to understand that this isn't easy for him, that this connection feels both like salvation and suffocation, and he's battling every urge to ruin it before it can ruin him. His eyes will beg you not to look too closely and plead with you to never look away. All at once, it won't last long. For most avoidant men, that level of eye contact in a moment of intimacy feels like standing too close to a fire. Exhilarating, purifying, but ultimately unbearable. But if you're paying attention, if you can catch it, it will be the most honest thing you'll ever witness from him. You'll see the boy he was before the world taught him it was dangerous to love. You'll see the man he's trying to become in spite of that. And you'll realize that no matter what he says or how distant he acts in the daylight, those seconds are proof that he feels things most people wouldn't survive. It's not that avoidants don't love deeply. It's that they love in secret, in stolen moments, in unsafe spaces inside their own heads. And in those moments where his body betrays him, where his touch and his gaze and his trembling breath confess everything his pride won't, you'll know you are the only person who's ever made him feel this way. Avoidant men carry trauma in their bones, in their reflexes, in the microexpressions they think no one catches, and in physical intimacy, all of it surfaces whether they want it to or not. Love, for them, isn't declared through poems and speeches, but through hesitation, through the way their hand lingers on your cheek a moment longer than necessary, through the way their thumb brushes your collarbone absent-mindedly, like a man trying to etch your outline into his memory, through the way they hesitate before letting go of your hand after, because letting go feels like losing the only piece of safety they've known. These aren't rehearsed moves. These are primal, desperate, honest gestures born from a place so unguarded it terrifies them more than rejection ever could. The world teaches men, especially avoidant men, to control their emotions, to turn lovemaking into a performance rather than a surrender, and they learn to master their bodies in ways that hide their hearts. But love strips away that control. Love makes his touch slow down, makes his breathing match yours without realizing it, makes his gaze soften and linger and betray every wall he's built. It turns sex from an act into a language, one where his fingers confess apologies he'll never speak, where his body apologizes for every time his fear made him cold, where his trembling breath whispers, "Please don't leave me into your neck." It's a language only people who've been hurt can recognize, a language that doesn't need words because it's spoken in the way his arms tighten around you afterward, in the way his palm rests against your stomach protectively, like he's still holding the most fragile part of himself. And if you've ever felt it, if you've ever experienced the man who was built to run, lets himself stay, and lets his body love you in a way his mind is too scared to admit, then you'll understand why ordinary love will never satisfy you again. Because it's not about perfection. It's not about polished words or flawless moves. It's about the tremor in his hand when he touches your face. It's about the 1 second his eyes beg you to see him before he looks away. It's about the way his body betrays the fear he won't name and confesses the love he won't claim. And if you know how to read that language, you'll realize it's the most powerful, soul-ruining, beautiful kind of love there is. The most powerful proof of genuine love from an avoidant man is not in what he says, not in the grand gestures, not even in the physical closeness during lovemaking, but in the loaded, thick, electric silence that hangs in the air after it's over, because for a man whose entire survival instinct is built around escape, the moments after vulnerability are the most dangerous, the most revealing, the most suffocating, and it's in those moments where his fear is loudest and his impulse to detach is at its peak that the most honest act of love he'll ever give you happens if he chooses to stay in it, if he lets the weight of what just happened instead of scrambling to fill it with meaningless words. Avoidant men don't fear physical closeness as much as they fear emotional exposure, and lovemaking is often a controlled, compartmentalized space where they can engage without truly being seen. But the second it's over, the armor that cracked open during those minutes to collapse entirely, and their first reflex is to put it all back in place, to reach for distraction, to roll away, to bury the intimacy under casual remarks or even complete disengagement, because the silence that follows is the scariest place for a man who avoids himself. But when love is real, when the connection wasn't just physical but soul level, when he felt something in those moments that he spent a lifetime trying to avoid feeling, there's a hesitation, a noticeable, almost unbearable stillness in the room where neither of you moves, and you can feel it like static in your lungs. You can feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on both of you, and instead of deflecting or escaping, he stays in that space, not because it's safe, but because for the first time, the fear of losing you outweighs the terror of being seen. And he sits in that aftermath, not knowing what to do with himself. And that's exactly where his love screams the loudest. It won't look like a confession. It won't sound like promise. It won't come with soft words or tender admissions, because for avoidant men, that language is foreign, dangerous, and loaded with risk. But what it will come as his presence, as the refusal to flee, as his body remaining close to yours even when his mind is urging him to create distance. It comes as him lying next to you, staring at the ceiling in silence, because every part of him is processing what it means to have just let you in that deep, and what it means that you didn't run, what it means that you stayed. And that silent processing is the equivalent of 1,000 I love yous from a man like him, because his silence isn't emptiness. It's the battlefield after the war. It's the sound of someone fighting decades of survival instinct in real time. People don't tell you this about avoidance. They don't explain how the most powerful moment isn't the act itself, but the one after, where the room goes quiet and everything inside him rises to the surface, where old traumas start whispering that this is dangerous, that closeness is a trap that he should shut down, but instead he fights it, minute by minute, choosing to let that thick, loaded, terrifying quiet hang between you both without destroying it with false indifference. And if you're paying attention, if you're emotionally attuned, tiresome, you'll realize that those moments are more intimate than the physical act could ever be, because that's where the truth lies. In what he doesn't say, in what he refuses to disguise, you'll see it in the way his hand stays resting on your skin, even though he's silent, in the way his breathing stays close to yours instead of retreating, in the way he gazes into nothingness like he's searching for the courage to let himself stay present instead of mentally checking out. And every second that passes in that raw aftermath is him choosing you, not with flowers, not with promises, not with grand declarations, but with the quiet defiance of a man choosing to stay exposed when his instinct tells him to armor up. It's in those silent minutes that you learn everything you'll ever need to know about how he feels, because words can lie, actions can be rehearsed. But presence in raw, unguarded silence is something no avoidant man gives unless it matters. That loaded silence is his way of grieving every version of himself he knows he's betraying by allowing himself to feel this much. It's his way of mourning the safety of distance. He can no longer run back to because you've become the exception. It's the sound of fear and love colliding inside a man who's terrified of both but finds himself unable to let you go. And it matters because you won't get it often. You won't always see it clearly, but when you do, it's a sacred thing, something people spend lifetimes chasing but never find because it requires both people to be brave enough to sit in the heaviness without numbing it, without fleeing it, without pretending it doesn't matter. In that silence, you'll feel every unspoken thing, the apologies he won't say for pushing you away, the confessions he doesn't know how to make, the desperate need to ask you not to leave, and the gratitude that you haven't. It'll be there in the air, in the way neither of you wants to be the first to move, because moving means breaking it, and neither of you wants to break it because you both know something rare happened. Here, something beyond explanation, something that terrifies and saves you both in equal measure. And even though he might not have the words, his choice to stay, to not fill the air with distraction, to not reach for his phone, to not cover himself in jokes or distance, is his way of saying everything. You won't find this in relationship advice columns. You won't hear it in the polished lectures of love coaches because most people don't understand what it means when someone whose nature is to run chooses to stay. They don't know how sacred that silence is, how loud it actually is. If you know how to listen, how in those minutes where nothing is said, everything is being communicated at a volume that could shatter you. And the real tragedy is most people miss it because they're conditioned to look for love in words and grand gestures when the deepest, most honest parts of a person are always revealed in the quiet spaces, in what they do when no one's watching, in whether they can sit in the aftermath of raw exposure without rushing to bury it. And for the avoidant man who loves you, every second he chooses to stay in that aftermath is a rebellion against his past, a confession of what he won't say, a moment where love matters more than fear and presence matters more than comfort. And if you're wise enough to feel it, to witness it without demanding it be dressed up in words, you'll realize you've just seen something rare, something beautiful, something most people spend their whole lives chasing without ever recognizing when it's right in front of them